Well, there were three of us in this marriage, so it was a
The
bit
29th
crowded.
of July 1981, the world stopped to watch a fairy tale unfold. A young kindergarten teacher stepped into St. Paul's Cathedral and emerged as the Princess of Wales. A gown that trailed for meters, choirs echoing through vaulted ceilings, billions of eyes glued to a love story crowned before it had even begun. They called it the wedding of the century. They promised it would be forever. But beneath the tiaras and trumpets, another truth was already pulsing. Behind the balcony wave, there were glances that didn't meet, silences too heavy to ignore, and a shadow that stood between the bride and groom, a shadow named Camilla. What the cameras captured was perfection. What they missed was a fracture that would grow with time, until the fairy tale collapsed under its own weight. For Diana, the fairy tale became a gilded cage. She smiled for the crowds, raised her sons, and became the most photographed woman in the world. Yet in private, she wept. In the palace that promised protection, she discovered betrayal. In the marriage that was meant to crown her, she found herself abandoned. How does the most celebrated love story of the century turn into the most public heartbreak of all time? Why did no one listen when the young princess whispered her loneliness? And how did the woman once hailed as the people's princess end up fighting for her very sense of self? To understand the betrayal that shook not just a marriage but a monarchy, we must step back past the balcony, past the vows, into the childhood of a girl who longed for love, and into the palace walls where promises turned to silence. Diana Frances Spencer was born on the 1st of July 1961 in a grand estate in Norfolk, but grandeur does not guarantee warmth. She was the fourth of 5 children in a family that carried titles, but also fractures. Her parents' marriage was brittle, marked by quarrels that echoed through long corridors. When Diana was just a child, her mother left the household. The absence carved itself into her, a wound disguised beneath pony rides and lessons in etiquette. She grew up craving a love that would not disappear. At school, teachers remembered a girl who was shy yet eager to please, clumsy in her studies but radiant in her kindness. Friends would later recall how deeply she felt every slight, every silence. Diana's sensitivity, celebrated by those who knew her, was also her burden. She absorbed pain like a sponge, carrying it quietly, never sure when it might spill over. The loss of her parents' unity created in her a silent fear that devotion is always fragile, that even promises can fracture without warning. That fear never left her. It became the invisible lens through which she viewed every relationship, every vow. As adolescence bloomed, Diana dreamed not of titles or crowns, but of being seen, truly seen, in ways her childhood had denied her. She danced ballet, listened to pop records, scribbled notes in diaries where she confessed her longing for something simple, a love that would be absolute, a bond that would not abandon her like the adults in her early life. This hunger for love, planted in the soil of neglect, would shape her future with devastating precision. When a prince offered her the fairy tale, she did not hesitate. She believed at last she had found what she had been searching for since childhood: permanence, devotion, safety. What she did not yet know was that the same fragility she feared would soon replay itself on the grandest stage in the world. When Diana Spencer became Diana, Princess of Wales, the transformation was instant and merciless. At just 20 years old, she walked into Westminster with the shy smile of a girl and emerged into a storm of flashbulbs as the most famous woman on earth. Every step she took, every glance, every dress, was multiplied across front pages and television screens. The world adored her. She was crowned the people's princess, long before the palace ever considered her one. Her fashion choices sparked trends. Her kindness melted protocol. She visited hospitals, held the hands of AIDS patients when few dared, knelt before children in war zones so the cameras had to look down, not up. To millions, she was not just a royal, but a saint in human form. But the applause that seemed endless in public often turned hollow in private. Life inside the palace was far colder than the adoring crowds outside its gates. Behind closed doors, Diana faced a silence that no cheering crowd could penetrate. She confessed to friends that she felt more alone in Buckingham Palace than she ever had as a schoolgirl in Norfolk. Her radiant smile became her armor. She learned to pose while breaking inside, to wave while wondering if anyone in the gilded rooms truly saw her. The tiara was heavy, not from diamonds, but from expectations she could never fulfill, to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect emblem of a monarchy already cracking under its own traditions. The public image was flawless. The fairy tale marriage, the beautiful sons, the immaculate gowns. But beneath the surface, something was rotting. Charles's heart was not fully hers. A name kept returning, whispered in the halls, glimpsed in photographs, hovering like a ghost. Camilla. And so, just as the world raised Diana onto a pedestal, her private world began to collapse. The fairy tale was already unraveling, thread by thread, while the camera still begged for one more smile. At first, Diana believed she had found the love that would steady her. Charles was older, experienced, the heir to the British throne. To her, he seemed like an anchor, a man whose presence promised stability, whose proposal promised permanence. The world framed it as destiny, a shy young woman chosen by a future king, a union meant to seal the monarchy's relevance in the modern age. But from the very beginning, shadows walked beside them. The warmth she longed for was often absent, replaced by formality and distance. Their conversations faltered, their silences stretched. Diana, with her heart wide open, sought tenderness. Charles, carrying another devotion, offered only fragments. That devotion had a name the entire kingdom would eventually know: Camilla Parker Bowles. For Diana, the discovery was devastating. She was not only sharing her husband with the public, but also with a woman who had never truly left his life. Every phone call, every whispered glance, every awkward pause at official events seemed to confirm what she feared. She was the third figure in her own marriage. At first, she tried to mold herself into what he wanted: obedient, poised, compliant. But the more she yielded, the more invisible she felt. Her vulnerability, born from childhood wounds, deepened into despair. She sought solace where she could, in her children, in her charity work, in rare moments of joy. Yet the palace walls kept closing in. Friends recalled her speaking of suffocation, of nights spent crying alone. She confessed in interviews that she felt unworthy, convinced she was failing in the one role the world demanded of her: wife to the heir. In truth, it was not her failure, but the weight of a marriage already poisoned by betrayal. The love story once hailed as a fairy tale was becoming something else entirely. A theater of obligation, where duty was mistaken for devotion and betrayal hid behind polished smiles. To the public, they remained the golden couple. To Diana, it was a love that drained more than it gave, a bond that chipped away at her spirit, one silent night at a time. By the early 1992, the cracks could no longer be hidden behind palatial curtains. What began as whispers in drawing rooms became front-page headlines. Diana and Charles no longer played the role of harmony convincingly. Their arguments leaked into public view, their coldness captured by cameras meant to record love. The breaking point came in a series of revelations that left the monarchy trembling. A secret phone conversation between Charles and Camilla, leaked to the press, painted in excruciating detail the intimacy he reserved for another. Around the same time, Diana's own confessions to biographers and journalists pulled the veil off the fairy tale. Her loneliness, her despair, her quiet rebellion. And then, the interview that would define her legacy on national television, her voice steady but her eyes betraying years of pain. Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. The world froze. The image of the perfect royal couple shattered in a single sentence. Millions, watching from their living rooms, saw not a princess, but a woman betrayed, vulnerable, yet impossibly brave, for saying aloud what the palace had denied for years. The reaction was seismic. Tabloids devoured every word, dissecting gestures, replaying glances. Supporters flooded Diana with letters, calling her courageous, calling her theirs. Others condemned her for breaking protocol, for daring to lift the curtain on royal life. But the effect was irreversible. The marriage of the century had become the scandal of the century. Behind the spectacle, Diana bore the toll. The paparazzi swarmed her day and night. Their flashes like lightning storms she could never escape. Every trip, every encounter, every private moment became a headline. She was both shielded and hunted, protected by fame, consumed by it. The young girl who once dreamed of love had now laid bare the betrayal of a dynasty. And in doing so, she forced the world to confront a haunting question. How much truth can a fairy tale endure before it crumbles into tragedy. In 1992, Prime Minister John Major announced to Parliament what the world already sensed. The Prince and Princess of Wales had formally separated. For the monarchy, it was an earthquake. For Diana, it was liberation laced with humiliation. The woman once crowned in lace and pearls was now a subject of political statements. Her heartbreak reduced to official decrees. The years that followed turned her marriage into a courtroom without walls. Lawyers, courtiers, and palace officials dissected every asset, every arrangement, every future title. The most bitter of questions custody of William and Harry was negotiated not just in legal terms but in the court of public opinion. Diana fought not only for her role as mother, but for her identity in a family that had already exiled her in all but name. In 1996, the divorce was finalized. Diana lost the style of Her Royal Highness, a symbolic strike meant to remind the world she was no longer part of the institution. Yet the move backfired. Stripped of protocol, she became freer, more relatable, even more adored. Crowds cheered her louder, seeing not a princess behind glass, but a woman surviving betrayal and daring to begin again. For Charles, the consequences were complex. His reputation, already stained by scandal, would take years to recover. The man destined to be king now carried the image of a husband who had betrayed the most beloved woman in the world. The monarchy itself was shaken, forced to modernize under the glare of a public that no longer tolerated silence and secrecy. But the real consequences were quieter, more intimate. Diana, though free on paper, remained a prisoner of relentless media pursuit. Every outing was stalked by photographers, every friendship twisted into speculation. Her freedom was paradoxical. She had won her name back, but lost the sanctuary of privacy forever. The law had ended the marriage, but no decree could erase the scars it left on Diana, on her sons, and on the monarchy itself. The fairy tale had been dismantled piece by piece, leaving behind a kingdom forced to ask whether the cost of tradition was too high when measured against a single human heart. When the dust of divorce settled, Diana was no longer bound by crowns or titles, yet she emerged not diminished, but magnified. Freed from the palace walls, she forged her own identity, an identity far greater than the institution that had once defined her. She walked into hospitals without ceremony, sat beside the sick without gloves, embraced children orphaned by landmines and war. She dared to place her hands on those the world feared to touch AIDS patients, the forgotten, the stigmatized, and in doing so, she shifted the conscience of an era. No decree, no crown, no scandal could erase the power of that compassion. Her legacy was not written in jewels or castles, but in gestures of tenderness seen by millions. She redefined what it meant to be royal, not distance but closeness, not spectacle but service. The world called her the people's princess, but in truth, she became something larger, a mirror for those who had ever felt abandoned, betrayed, or silenced. Her sons, William and Harry, carry her memory like a compass. Every step they take in public life is shadowed by her absence, yet guided by her example. For them, she is not just a myth. She is the mother who knelt to their height, who taught them to see the world's pain and answer it with kindness. And for us, her story remains a paradox. A woman who lived inside the most glittering cage and yet managed to break its bars, leaving behind not tragedy alone, but a vision of resilience. Diana's eyes closed on a summer night in Paris, but her spirit did not. It lingers in every act of defiance against cruelty, in every insistence on tenderness over tradition. She was betrayed in love, but she triumphed in humanity. And that, more than any crown, is the inheritance she left to the world.